Breaking tonight, the U.S. president posted a message on Truth Social announcing he had canceled a planned trip by U.S. representatives to Islamabad that was meant to facilitate talks with Iranian officials. In his post, he wrote, "I just canceled the trip of my representatives. Going is Islamabad to I think it means to Islamabad, Pakistan, to meet with the Iranians. Too much time wasted on traveling, too much work." Besides which, there is tremendous infighting and confusion within their leadership. Nobody knows who is in charge, including them. Also, we have all the cards, they have none. If they want to talk, all they have to do is call. That single public post has, within hours, reshaped a fragile diplomatic track that had been quietly building momentum. For days, Pakistan, with backing from a number of regional partners, had positioned itself as a potential mediator, coordinating with officials and envoys from multiple capitals to arrange a face-to-face meeting between U.S. and Iranian representatives. The meeting was not meant to resolve every outstanding issue in a single session. Rather, it was intended as a discreet confidence-building step toward halting a wider escalation that has threatened regional commerce and international security. The context matters. Over the past week, there were reports of a temporary cessation of hostilities and a fragile reduction in kinetic activity at sea. Iranian officials were publicly setting conditions for any renewed talks, and mediators in Islamabad were working to fashion an agenda and a format acceptable to both sides. According to those involved, the Iranians insisted on a set of conditions they described as necessary for any meaningful engagement, including, they said, relief from certain maritime restrictions and guarantees about the scope and sequencing of any follow-on measures. Those conditions and the wider political dynamics inside Iran were at the heart of the dispute. In his message, the president pointed to what he described as infighting within Iran's leadership, asserting that there was confusion over who speaks for Tehran. Whether that internal dynamic is real, exaggerated, or being invoked for diplomatic leverage, it matters because mediation in situations like this depends on an identifiable counterpart, a person or team with a clear mandate to negotiate and implement what they agree to. Pakistan's effort was not a solo effort. Diplomats on the ground say the initiative counted on the tacit support of several regional powers. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, and Qatar were all reported to have been involved in back channels, outreach, and phone diplomacy. The small but influential Gulf state, whose ruler has frequently played a quiet conciliatory role, reportedly urged restraint and sought to keep the ceasefire intact. Those combined efforts aim to provide a neutral setting, a guarantee of safety, and the sort of procedural framework that could shepherd negotiators through a first tabletop exchange. Behind the scenes, officials were working to bridge a deep trust deficit. Iranian delegations and their interlocutors repeatedly referenced past negotiations in Geneva and Oman, where agreements or understandings had been disrupted by subsequent military actions they blamed on outside powers. Iranian voices described a pattern in which bargaining over terms was followed, in their view, by kinetic strikes that undercut confidence. In short, Iran's negotiating posture was shaped not only by immediate demands over maritime operations and sanctions relief, but also by a memory and a fear that any concessions could be undercut by future force. Equally important were the constraints on the American side. U.S. Officials had been balancing domestic political considerations, alliance relationships, and the message they wanted to send to Tehran. For the last week, Washington had extended a ceasefire and publicly described a willingness to explore diplomatic channels. But the language in the president's post that the United States have all the cards underscores a posture of leverage, the assertion that the U.S. believes it can set terms rather than bend to Iranian preconditions. What changed tonight is procedural but consequential. A trip that had been advertised and quietly planned was called off. Those who believe the meeting could have opened a narrow channel of communication now worry that overt public steps have been replaced by stop-start statements and unilateral posturing. Diplomacy, several seasoned observers caution, is usually an unglamorous, patient process. It is built on telephone calls, secure envoys, private assurances, and long periods of preparation. A public cancellation issued on social media and unaccompanied by detailed clarifications risks eroding the trust that painstaking back channels had been trying to restore. From Islamabad, where Pakistani interlocutors had been preparing to receive guests from both sides, the reaction was a mixture of surprise and restraint. Officials who had been coordinating logistics and agenda items were already in motion when the announcement came. Several diplomats and security figures reached by phone described their work as a necessary, if delicate, attempt to avoid a larger conflagration. They stressed that mediation is rarely linear, plans are formed and reformed, and the diplomatic record is littered with talks that fell apart before reconvening in slightly altered form. For them, the crucial question is whether this cancellation is a terminal blow to the process or merely a tactical pause. The Iranian response, as relayed by sources with access to Tehran's negotiating team, was blunt. They were not seeking talks on Washington's timetable. Iranian representatives were said to be standing by a clearly articulated set of conditions, a list of points they said would govern any return to the table. They insisted that any engagement begin with the lifting of certain maritime restrictions and a credible guarantee against resumed hostilities. Tehran's posture, from what mediators report, has been that they will not enter into negotiations that leave those underlying concerns unaddressed. There is a practical dimension to this standoff. The Strait of Hormuz is a strategic choke point through which a substantial share of the world's seaborne oil passes. Any disruption there has immediate economic and political consequences far beyond the region. Over the last week, reports suggested intense activity in negotiations about rules of navigation and the terms under which commercial and military vessels might resume normal operations. For merchant fleets, insurers, and energy markets, the prospect of a return to normal is not merely abstract. It affects shipping schedules, insurance premiums, and global price volatility. Beyond the material stakes lies the diplomatic arithmetic. Pakistan, which has historic ties across the region and a reputation for discreet mediation, was trying to convene a format that might allow both sides to claim a measure of success without public humiliation. That balancing act requires downplaying triumphalism on one side and dodge the perception of capitulation on the other. By canceling the trip in such a public way, the U.S. president has introduced a new variable, the optics of unilateralism. When one party takes a public combative stance, the other side can either mirror it or harden its conditions. Neither path bodes well for compromise. Analysts watching these developments say there are a few likely scenarios. One possibility is damage control. Diplomats will intensify private outreach to clarify whether the cancellation is absolute or merely temporary. In this scenario, back channels via third-party capitals and envoys will do the heavy lifting, and a revised plan may yet emerge that accommodates the concerns raised by both sides. Another scenario is an escalation of rhetoric and limited kinetic exchanges, a dangerous spiral in which military incidents, miscalculations, or proxy actions intensify without a clear mechanism for de-escalation. Such a spiral could draw in allies and regional players and would increase the risk to commercial shipping and regional security. A third path, which negotiators still hope for, is a reframing of the talks, a step-by-step approach that unbundles the most contentious issues and sequences them so that small assurances, say verified adjustments to maritime operations, are tied to narrowly defined relief measures. That model requires trust and patient verification protocols, but it has precedent in other high-stakes negotiations where parties were reluctant to accept a single sweeping bargain. What makes any of these outcomes unpredictable is the human element, leadership choices, domestic politics, and the unpredictable moves of actors reluctant to be seen conceding ground. On the Iranian side, hardliners and pragmatic voices are constantly balancing domestic narratives about sovereignty and strength. On the U.S. side, leadership statements made in public forums can sometimes be followed by clarifying directives in private. The net effect is that public statements are often only part of the story. The real consequential diplomacy happens behind closed doors. Tonight's development also highlights a broader regional truth. Third-party mediation remains vital. Whether led by Islamabad, a Gulf capital, or another neutral actor, regional mediation has at times provided the space for grander powers to take tentative steps back from the brink. The willingness of regional leaders to invest political capital in peacemaking, to pick up the phone, host envoys, and shuttle proposals is not merely charitable. For many of these states, containment and stability in their neighborhood are existential imperatives. A badly managed confrontation threatens their own security, economies, and political stability. For the international community, the immediate priority must be to maintain channels for de-escalation. That means reopening lines of communication where possible, encouraging restraint, and supporting quiet, verifiable measures that reduce the risks of accidental confrontation. It also means acknowledging the legitimate concerns of all parties and designing a framework that does not require one side to accept humiliation as the price of talks. If there is one lesson from diplomatic history, it is that momentary setbacks need not become permanent failures. Negotiations have a way of finding new openings, sometimes after weeks of silence, sometimes after a single decisive gesture. The task for mediators now will be to keep those openings alive, to shield sensitive discussions from the glare of public posturing, and to remind all sides of what is at stake if the fragile calm that has so far held gives way to renewed conflict. As the night deepens, what we are left with is uncertainty and urgency, uncertainty about whether a scheduled meeting will be resurrected in a different form, and urgency because the stakes are high and the costs of miscalculation are real. For sailors in the region, for energy markets, and for communities living in the shadow of potential violence, those costs are immediate. The president's message on social media has, by its bluntness, made clear one thing: the calculus in Washington has shifted, at least publicly. Whether that shift marks the end of a tentative diplomatic channel or a pause that precedes a more disciplined private engagement is the central question now. Diplomats in Islamabad, in Gulf capitals, and in Western capitals will be working through the night to answer it. Tonight, then, is a reminder that diplomacy is often uneven, fragile, and subject to sudden interruptions. But it is also a reminder that the machinery of negotiation does not shut down because a meeting is canceled. It adapts, it recalibrates, and sometimes with enough persistence and discretion, it finds a way back to the table. We will continue to watch for further developments, any official clarification from Washington, any formal response from Tehran, and any movement from the regional actors who have invested so much in keeping the door open. Until then, the world watches, aware that a single social media post has, in an instant, reshaped a delicate and potentially consequential diplomatic effort.